Yeah, that's really a great question, and that's really what we've seen advisors take with and run as we've been out there with different solutions. Is this idea that for a vast majority of people, as we mentioned, their Social Security is their largest annuity, and they want ways to figure out how to take control of a situation that they think's out of control. And so it really has been helpful for advisors to go in and say, hey, we can finally do something about this issue. We can finally put you in charge. And I was in New York last week, and as I think about the future, and I think as the industry thinks about the future, we always talk about income planning and retirement, and what are the options available for us to get that guaranteed income. And Social Security, in almost all elements, in all periodicals, all paper, is part of your guaranteed income source. But right on the statement of Social Security, it says, hey, it might not be there. And so, or it might not be there in full as promised. And so changing the conversation to say, hey, there's other guaranteed income sources out there that we can use to enhance, buffer, and supplement whatever might happen with Social Security is really perks up the client's engagement, because they're like, man, that's really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the stability of cash flow. I'm looking for a way to plan that income in retirement. Social Security is, for a vast majority of Americans, a large part of that. And if we can find ways to take that risk out of the equation, then the customers respond.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember the first time I looked at my Social Security statement, and I saw that disclaimer, and then and even now, I'm of the basic belief that the base case is that they will deliver on what they promised. At the same time, I read that and I said, well, it's there. It's not there for nothing. Like, it should give some pause, right? It's not to be ignored, right? And so it's a very interesting type of transparency that the government is presenting us with there, and we should take heed of it.
It gets better than that. I mean, for 3 or 4 decades, it was right on the main page in bold letters that said Congress can change the law at any time, so far based on current law. If things don't change, we can only pay the full amount up until 2033, basically right now, of what it currently says. But this past year, they've actually enhanced the statement, or they've changed the statement. They've had this big Social Security statement redesign. And the redesign now goes to a full one-pager about whether or not your Social Security will be there. And so it actually has enhanced. It's in color now. Before it was just in black and white. Now they have pictures, and they say things like, well, the trust fund is reducing, and Congress has made changes in the past, and they could, but if not, don't worry, you still get 75 cents on every dollar, and it's right there, on a link.
Well, yeah. Now, Randy said, we started recording this show. Okay, COVID had given us $3 a gallon gas. Now, this week, what COVID? How about a war? War, right. And we're looking at $7 or $8 of a gallon for gas. Now, we all know everything we buy has some element of gas prices or fuel prices embedded in it. So, like, whatever we thought inflation was going to be 5 days ago, it's going to be probably more this year, especially if this thing goes on for forever and ever. How does this change a Social Security equation that an advisor and a client may have to work through?
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul. There's been debate for years on what is the proper kind of inflation metric to gauge Social Security around, and I think just last year we had the second largest, I believe, since the early 80s increase in cost of living adjustment, 5.9%. And that's sort of part of the beauty of Social Security. It is inflation adjusted, right? And so it does try to ebb and flow based on some of the purchasing power questions that you're asking. The issues are it moves so drastically fast and has moved so drastically fast. In fact, last year, just to give you an idea of if the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, last year, the last day of September, they released the Social Security Trustee report. Usually it comes out in April, May, so it was super late. Then if you remember a few months later, they issued what the new cost of living adjustment for 2022 is going to be. Well, in the report at the end of September, they forecasted it was going to be about 3%. They were almost 100% off within a 2 to 3 month span. You're right. And so first you have to say, okay, how good of data am I getting from Social Security Administration, and what is that going to mean to kind of my cost of living adjustment? So we all know we went through this inflationary period, and we're currently on that as well, and I think there's already been rumblings that there's going to be another large cost of living adjustment. But now the rumblings are that it isn't reflective of the costs that most people on Social Security actually have. And so it's geared towards the CPI index, CPIU index, I think. And they want to switch it to the CPIE index that is more reflective of the cost for the elderly. And that is theoretically going to, what they would want to do is create a larger index that's more reflective, which talks about this medical inflation, which is higher than even normal inflation, which is what's thrown kind of the whole healthcare industry costs off. And really, there's a lot of fighting about whether or not that index can change. And again, it takes so much bipartisan work to get anything with Social Security done that that environment doesn't exist.